Hello and welcome to Tracy Momey Reads. I am back again with another book review. And I have broken out of my shell. The last few books I've read have not been mysteries. So I don't want you guys to start coming here thinking, oh, all she's going to be reading is mysteries and that's all she talks about. I mean, while they are very captivating, I realize that there are other genres and other books out there to be read. So I'm going to start trying to do a better job of mixing in the different genres of books that I read. And I am so excited about the book today that I'm going to be reviewing. I would say that it's probably maybe in the top 5 of the books that I've read this year. But before I tell you what book I'm reviewing, I want to ask you guys to go ahead and subscribe to my channel right now and turn on that notification bell so that you can be notified when I have new videos come out. So, without further ado, the book that I'm going to be reviewing today is This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. This Time Tomorrow. Oh my goodness. And you know what? I had said back when I read the Time Salvager that was my first sci-fi book. But I guess any book that has like elements of let's say time travel or fictitious type characters like vampires and werewolves. I guess all of those are kind of in the vein of sci-fi. So having said that, I've read several sci-fi books. And the reason why I bring that up is because this book, This Time Tomorrow, has, a sci-fi element to it because it does involve some time travel. I was getting very, the Midnight Library. I was getting vibes like the Midnight Library from this book because of the time travel and the reasons the person was time traveling and all that stuff. But okay, so let me get into it, give you the premise. So there is a girl, well, not even a girl, a woman. When the story starts off, there's a woman named Alice. And she's like almost 40. She's kind of just going through, the routine of life. She's not married, doesn't have any kids. Her father is very ill, like on his deathbed ill, and he's in the hospital. So there's scenes with her going to visit him and things of that nature. She has a really good friend, a best friend, a woman named Sam, that she's known since she was a kid. She has a boyfriend, but it's not really that deep of a connection. She's just kind of like floating through life. And again, she's almost 40. So her main concern is that, her dad is at the end of his life, and she never really feels like she made a real connection with him. And her mom is out of the picture. Her mom left her and her dad when she was younger. There's mention of her mom, but they don't really have a relationship, and she's not really in the book, So her 40th birthday comes around, and she ends up meeting her friend Sam, the woman, that she's been friends with since they were young. She ends up meeting her for dinner and drinks or whatever. But Sam is married and has small kids. So it was kind of like, sorry, sweetie, but, I can only stay for like an hour or two. Got a sick kid at home. I got to leave. So Alice didn't want to, just like this is a milestone birthday. She didn't want to just go back to her apartment because, spoiler, the boyfriend kind of is out of the picture at this point. So she didn't want to go back to her apartment alone. So she decides there's this bar that, she starts walking through the old neighborhood, and it's a bar that used to serve teens or let the teens come in there and hang out. And she kind of remembers, like when she was younger, the fun she used to have there. So she's like, I'm going to go have a drink here, in this bar. So she goes and she gets a drink, and there's people in there that gonna celebrate with her. And she ends up going to her dad's house because he still lives in the neighborhood. And she goes to his house, but she forgot her keys or something. She can't get into the place. So there's like this shed, because it's like these cute little row of houses. I think it's called Pomander, and it's in New York. And I actually looked it up, and it actually is a neighborhood. Pomander Walk, I believe. And so anyway, there's this shed, that community kind of uses or whatever, but her dad has a lot of his stuff in there, and she can't get into his house because she didn't have the key. So she decides, I am so drunk, I cannot make it home. It's New York, it's late at night. I'm going to go crash in this shed. So she goes and she, lays down in the shed, moves some stuff around. She wakes up the next morning. She's in her bed in her dad's house, but she's not 40 anymore. She's 16. So yeah, it was giving very, 13 going on 30, like all these shows and movies where people, it's really interesting because in the book, like she named a lot of that stuff, because it's like a lot of pop culture references, which was really cool to be able to be so familiar with a lot of the things that she mentioned, because I think she goes back to 96 or so, because I think she's like 10 years younger than my age. So yeah, I think it was 96 when she went back. So she names a lot of stuff like, that she can relate to try to figure out maybe what's happening to her. And of course, nobody in the current timeline, her dad, her friend Sam, nobody knows that she's like time traveling, I guess, or that she's inhabited the body of her 16-year-old self, because she remembers everything. It's not like, oh, she just wakes up and she's 16 again and she has no prior memories of being 40 and having lived this whole life. No, she remembers everything. So she knows that this is not right and that she isn't supposed to be there. And it was so cool the way that the author described, like her friend Sam. We all need a Sam in our life. And I'm assuming it was short for Samantha. I don't think they ever called her Samantha in the book. But we all need a Sam in our life, because she, this is like her ride or die person, like that. Even when they're 40, like they're still like the best of friends. So she tells her 16-year-old self, and Sam is 16 as well. Oh, and when she wakes up and she's 16, it's her birthday, right? It's her birthday. So she tells Sam that, hey, you're not going to believe this. I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm from the future. And initially Sam was like, are you drunk? What is happening? I know it's your birthday. Stop being weird. But Sam rolls with it, and she's like, oh my God, tell me something about the future. And she's like, no, don't tell me. I don't want to know how it ends up or whatever. And she had to give her a few things because she wanted her to actually believe her. And in the end, Sam does believe her. She's like, yeah, we need to figure this out or whatever. Because Sam's like super smart, and, she does some research or whatever. And she tells Alice that the only person that can help her is going to be her dad. Now, let's take a step back. As I told you at the top of the video, her dad is dying in the present timeline. So he's a much older man. He's like 80, almost 80, in his late 70s. But obviously, when she goes back and she's 16, her dad is like this vibrant, like early 40s man. And she's just starting to recognize all these things about him that she never paid attention to. Because, like when you're between that age, 13 and maybe 18 or whatever, you're just so self-absorbed and like nobody else matters but you and what you want and how you feel. So she just becomes really in tune to her dad and, becomes a lot more affectionate and, just is reveling in this time. But the reason Sam tells her she needs to tell her dad is because Alice's dad is a famous author, and he wrote a book about these boys who time travel that got turned into a TV series. So, he had a little celebrity, back then. And him and his friends, they're all like kind of nerdy. They go to these sci-fi conventions and different things as authors, and they do cosplay and all kinds of stuff, even though they're like grown-ass men. But they're really into that kind of stuff, and they, have theories about whether or not time travel is real and this and that. So she doesn't want to tell her dad, but ultimately she's going to have to tell him, and she does end up telling him. And surprise, surprise, he knew. I'm not going to tell you how he knew or why he knew, but he knew. So when she goes to sleep, because it's determined that that particular shed is the portal, if you will. You know, if she goes to sleep there, she's going to wake up, you know, in her 16-year-old body, but it's always going to be the same day. So that's like Groundhog Day. Like if she goes back and goes to sleep, when she wakes up, it's going to be her 16th birthday again. And then when she falls asleep, she'll be back in her present timeline. But if she goes back to the shed and goes to sleep, she's going to wake up and it's going to be her 16th birthday again. And only like maybe an hour or so, if that long, has passed in the future, you know, in her present time. So she's there the whole day, but it's like she's only been missing maybe for an hour or so in her present timeline. And I will tell you that, you know, the first go round, she did do some stuff, you know, because you see this all the time when you watch movies or read books about time travel, how you're not supposed to mess with the timeline. You can't do anything because, you know, it's like, I guess, like the butterfly effect. If you change one thing, it could change something in the future. And of course she does that because she's always had this regret about something she didn't do. So when she's 16, she goes ahead and does it. And then when she wakes up the next day, her life is totally different. So she has to, you know, she keeps going back. So that might be a slight spoiler, but I think that might be in the blurb as well. But obviously she keeps going back. And her main reason for going back is because she's trying to find a way to save her dad, because every time she goes back to the present, he's still sick and he has cancer. I think he doesn't have cancer, but it's something that's kind of manifesting like cancer, but the doctors can't figure out what it is. And it's killing him, and you know, his time is limited. And she's like, stop smoking, stop drinking soda. Every time she goes back, she's trying to give him all these health tips, and he's taking all her advice, but every time she goes back, he's still in the hospital and he's still sick. And towards the end of the book, we discover what his illness is. So yeah, you know, like I said, when she was going back and forth, it was really reminding me of the Midnight Library, where the character in that particular book kept living out these different versions of her life by picking another book at the Midnight Library. But I don't know, just like in that book, it ultimately, the realization, because I'm sure a lot of people, you know, a lot of us are maybe think that there's, oh, this one thing I would want to redo, or I want to visit the past to spend time maybe with a loved one, or, you know, or maybe make a different decision or something like that. But just like in these stories, ultimately, they realize that they have kind of romanticized the past. And I think we all do that, you know, especially as you get older. I will tell you, you know, you start thinking, because you have less years ahead of you than you do behind you, that back there was this magical time and these things. And like in the book, you know, when she goes back and, you know, similar to the Midnight Library, it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute. This still didn't make me happy, me going back doing this thing. Or, you know, you go back and you see it with fresh eyes, because, you know, our memory starts to fade over time. So we may not have as a sharp of a recollection of the way things actually played out. And like I said, we romanticize things and just kind of just wax poetic about how things were so much better back then. And it's not always the case. You know, you always end up, I think, even if you end up taking detours or getting off track, ultimately you're going to lead the life that was meant for you to live, no matter how long or short, or how, you know, fraught it is with, you know, ups and downs. Ultimately, the path that you're on is kind of where you're meant to be. It's like serendipitous. But yeah, it was really a really good book. There's very, you know, there's some very poignant moments. It's a lot of nostalgia. There's some heartbreaking parts, hilarious parts. I mean, it covered all the bases when in a story, you know, when you're reading and you're wanting to be transported. I mean, in this case, it was like literally being transported through the author's characters, but also as a reader, you know, you want to touch a lot of different emotions and kind of really be so absorbed in the story that you're rooting for the characters and you're rooting for a certain outcome. And that's the thing about, you know, reading. And I guess this, I mean, I saw that one of the tags was sci-fi, but I would also say that it's kind of contemporary fiction also, because even though that was the main thread running through the book, there were just so many other issues that she covered with love and family and friendship, you know. And that's one thing I will admit that you don't get a lot of from mystery books, because mystery and suspense books, it's all about who done it. That's your main frame of thought. That's all you're doing when you're reading. You're picking apart, trying to figure out who's the culprit, who's the bad guy, who committed the crime. But when you read like contemporary fiction type books, there's just so many different things that these authors touch upon that you can kind of really get more lost in those stories. And you know, those are my favorite type of stories to read. So anyway, Emma Straub, This Time Tomorrow. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Can't wait to check out some more of her books. I really love her writing style. So again, if you are a fan of stories like The Midnight Library, and stories where people kind of get a do-over, stories that touch on family relationships, stories that are going to maybe bring a tear or two to your eye, make you laugh, then this is definitely the book for you. Emma Straub, This Time Tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. If you have read This Time Tomorrow or any of Emma Straub's books, I'd love to know in the comments, what book should I check out next? Or let me know your thoughts on This Time Tomorrow. Thanks again to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. And like I said at the beginning, I will say it again, make sure that you subscribe to my channel, turn on post notifications, and make sure you like this video. Thanks again for watching, guys. Y'all have a great weekend. Bye.